Hey there, welcome to episode 57 of Money Never Sleeps, a podcast that looks inside the head of entrepreneurs and at what makes them do what they do. I'm Pete Townsend, your co-host of Money Never Sleeps, along with Owen Fitzgerald. This episode of Money Never Sleeps is kindly sponsored by Ireland's fintech and financial services recruitment specialist, Top Tier Recruitment. If you or a colleague need help attracting and retaining great talent for your fintech or financial services company, we highly recommend you have a chat with the team at Top Tier Recruitment, as they really know their stuff. You can find them at toptierrecruitment.com and tell them we sent you. In this episode, we talk to Andrew Mullaney, co-founder of Premind, a stealth stage venture predicting the minds of the markets. I met Andrew late last year through the buzzing startup and venture network that is Ireland these days. We got along famously with this initial target market being in a place where I spent the first 22 years of my career. A few months later, we reconnected in a burrito shop in Dublin and kept talking. Pero no más sobre burritos. So let's get on with episode 57 of Money Never Sleeps.
Money never sleeps, pal.
Here we go again. Welcome to Money Never Sleeps. We're here in WeWork Dublin Landings in the offices of our sponsor, Top Tier Recruitment. I'm Pete Townsend.
And I'm Owen Fitzgerald.
And we're here with Andrew Mullaney, the co-founder and CEO of Premind. Welcome to the show, Andrew.
CTO, believe it or not.
You're CTO?
Yeah.
Okay, very good. No, I missed that one. I nearly got that one wrong in the last one as well, but I actually turned it around pretty quickly, and I found out I did
Nobody
get it
has
right.
noticed.
No, nobody does notice, do they? Yeah, no. They're not going to go back to LinkedIn like I do.
The titles are certainly in the early days. They're not crazy important. Really.
No, exactly.
I'm focused on the tech stuff, so I guess that's CTO.
All right, good man. So you and I have been talking since December on a few different things, and I know that you and Owen know each other now as well, which is good. But for our listeners, maybe give us your backstory and how you got to this point in your life.
Yeah, Dublin's a small place, really, isn't it? It doesn't take long to. So, but for those who haven't bumped into me in Dublin or where else, I've born here in Dublin and grew up actually fairly international youth. Travelled around a good bit, which was a good and unique experience. And then I went to university in UCD, did a degree in engineering and master's in management science. Took the fairly regular career route into Accenture, stuck there for about 18 months. And I just had that. I had the itch. I always had it. I didn't really think I was going to embark on it. And then just, I don't know, when I was in my mid-20s, I just said, right, this is it, I'm going. Went out, wanted a challenge, got that times 10.
Yeah.
Very slow at the start. I started up a company called Easy Deals, which was digitizing deals and bringing them online about 11 years ago. It was pretty early. It was about 2 or 3 years before Groupon. And that was a failure. And learned a lot of lessons in that one.
Did Google doing any of that have anything to do with it?
Actually, no. I think it was a failure because more from our founding team, to be honest with you.
Okay.
Not from the team in that we didn't do anything wrong, but we made two crucial mistakes that are very easy to make at that time, which was we focused way too much in the Irish market, which is just not going to work out in digital. And I think we were too early as well, which is a common mistake for early founders. You think the earlier you are, the better you have an advantage, but timing is actually just about getting it right, not about being too early or being too late.
Yeah.
So those two things combined, and the market is really hard. And you see Mark Cummins with Pointy doing an excellent job, actually taking that market and taking a substantial amount of it. But when I was in it, I kind of thought, that's it. If we can't get it, and we were a small attempt, and there was many thousands of attempts, and Google and Facebook can't smack it, then there's something wrong with this industry for a reason it can't get digitized that well. But the best attempt I've seen is Pointy. It's amazing what those guys are doing.
And what he said recently, didn't he? You can't A/B test your way to a unicorn. Was that Mark Cummins that said that recently?
I won't validate the quote, but it wouldn't surprise me. I've seen that somewhere. I don't know.
I don't know, but I saw it in a link. In a post that was referencing him.
Yeah.
Right. And if you're going to try to A/B test your way to something in Ireland, to a unicorn in Ireland, no, you're not going to get too far.
And things are changing. You know, like I remember we were at the time, we were looking at golden pages, and we were like, golden pages was still a thing then, and like this is going to get digitized out and it's going to change. But you're kind of competing with an existing target, but the whole thing's moving at the same time. So A/B testing is great for incremental benefit, but paradigm shifts require totally different thinking. And when you've got dynamics that are moving very quickly, you can optimize yourself to an existing point when the market moves on. So I think you see a lot of efforts in tech, and generally startups, they're looking to see where the future of the industry will be and meet it there.
Okay, and just for any of our listeners, if you want to learn about A/B testing, check out The Lean Startup by Eric Ries. And if you haven't read that yet, you're in the startup space, read it.
don't quit your job yet.
Read that first. And then NewsWhip.
Yeah, so then after that was Easy Deals. Then I came away, I made myself 2 promises. I said I would not focus on the Irish market again. And I would go for a much bigger scale as well. And I met Paul. He had similar problems. He was involved in media, creating news stories, and it was called NewsWhip at the time. It was a media outlet, but he focused on the Irish market too. So we made the same mistake, and it was just really, really hard to make real. Both of us had good numbers on our sites, but we just couldn't get the money out of it. And so we were kind of banging heads and talking about stuff. And I remember I said to him once, in a throwaway comment, in what I thought was an impossible statement, I said, yeah, look, there's no point creating any more content. You just got to find out how to rank it. Like, we need a new Google. He kind of took it on board, and then he gave me a call a couple of weeks later, and he said, hey, I've got an idea. I want to take you out for dinner and bounce it off you. And he told me the idea behind NewsWhip, and I was like, yeah, that's a fantastic idea.
Where was that dinner?
That dinner was on Parliament Street, actually quite famous. What's the name of the restaurant? I'll never forget it. Anytime I walk by it, I always think, yeah, that was... Because I didn't really know Paul that well. I met him a couple of times. We were in the same entrepreneurship group. But, I was not expecting this at all. Though I was open to ideas at the time, because I knew my thing was fairly finished. He pitched it to me. Again, I thought, right, we're going to be too late here.
Is it that kebab shop on Parliament Street? What's it called? Xanadu, Sanders? Zaytoon. Yeah, no, it was
€7 each way. Yeah, here you go.
Good man.
Not far off it.
Unforgettable. But that was the beginning of something pretty impressive.
It was amazing, yeah. I mean, the kebab shop is a good joke, because I remember Paul said the idea. I was bought in straight up. I wanted to do a little bit of research because I thought it was probably done, but when I did, I couldn't believe it. And as it were, we were probably a little bit too early with NewsWhip, maybe a year or two. But you can survive that. But I said to Paul, I've got no money. I've got nothing. I'd spent everything on the last one, and I'd made a couple of mistakes that cost me quite a few bob as well. So I had absolutely nothing. And I said, we're going to have to figure out how to get this off the ground with nothing. Both of us had nothing. And you are able to do that. It was tight, but that's what you carry when you go through the experience of failing. You carry all the knowledge, and then even though you've got way less, you're way out in the desert with way less water and way less food, but you know how to survive. Yeah. And so you can get outcomes way faster.
Start cutting those cactuses open to drink that water.
Yeah. Do the Bear Grylls and crush some elephant dung.
Yeah. I'm sure there was a bit of that without a kebab. When the beginnings of NewsWhip, and probably the first 3 or 4 years into that, anything really stand out as, well, I've been through it once before with Easy Deals, got this going, we're out in the desert. Anything really stand out as, hey, I was able to survive this challenge because I already knew it was coming?
Yeah, I kind of had nothing to lose, I really, and that was how I viewed it. I was just like, I have no money, so really I can't lose anything. Yeah. I can't put it in. All I can do is lose my time, but I've already lost a load of that, so that's pretty cheap too. So I think getting your psychology around all this stuff is key, and so I was in a good place. And when you've got nothing to lose, you can really go for it. To be honest, I feel like I'm in a very similar stage now with Newswhip as with Premind. I feel like there was at the time that seemed to be what everyone else thought was a monumental task, which was to build as much of Newswhip as I possibly could in as short a period of time as possible. But I just loved that. And, I'd been hacking and I'd been getting better and better at tech and coding. And once you start getting a bit of momentum, then you just get this real feeling, and you're stuck into it. And even though you may not have done a round or anything like that, you're really on track. So no, it was really, really enjoyable. We got some good wins early actually with Newswhip. We needed them and we got lucky. We nearly had a big setback, but once we went live, actually, it kind of started taking off from there. Really, we didn't figure out the business model for ages, but we had a lot of notoriety and people found the thing interesting. We had novelty.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, when I first met Paul, probably about a little over a year ago, I was aware of Newswhip and knew what you guys were up to, but hadn't really ever dug in. And then talking to Paul, I'm like, oh wow, that I get that. That's pretty cool. And I start to think about all these different use cases, and I think you did too. Right, and that you're thinking about, that there's a core here of the increasing amount of data that's out there in the universe now, and it's not just random data; it is connected, and there are signs and signals that you can find on that you could do a number of different things with. And I saw that you came out of this with a few patents as well. That's pretty important to going to the next stage, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, it was another lesson I learned from the previous one. It was a pretty obvious idea, to be honest with you, to put deals online and digitize them at the time. I thought it was obvious. It is now obvious. It was probably a bit forward thinking then, but there was no real there's nothing special about what we were doing. We're just digitizing stuff and putting it onto an app. So there's no real protection. And if you're a small Irish company, the chances are that if someone's going to hit this, they're going to hit it in America and they're going to get funded by Sequoia to the tune of 40 million, and they're just going to wipe you off the face of the earth. So, I kind of seen that at that point in time, that was how the dynamics of these startups went. So I was like, no, I want protection, and that means I need to go into an area where we've got strong advantage from the point of view of our knowledge. And our combined knowledge, which was myself and Paul, and it was Paul's idea, and I was able to understand the technical elements to it to write a patent. And you just keep on tipping away, trying to, you build a business and trying to protect yourself from as many angles.
Oh, it's a huge process. My friends at QPQ, Greg Chu, who's the founder there, I know what they're going through when it comes to IP and getting their patents secured, and it's massive piece of work.
Oh, it took us 4 years, yeah.
Oh, I believe it. I believe it. It's hard graft.
Yeah,
it's hard graft.
So tell us then, tell us a bit about what you're doing now, or as much as you can share, and how I suppose how it flowed on from everything you've done in the past.
Yeah, so it's very natural. Just to add to your point earlier on, you said about there's so many ideas that you could do from it, and that can be a challenge as a startup, trying to figure out where is the best direction or what you can do with this. And Newswhip's data and technology is insanely powerful for many applications, and increasingly so as well as more information comes online and we digitize our behaviors around that more, and it's more measurable. And even I think it's starting to impact how we consume information now. I was just thinking about it on my way down here, which I don't think people really read information anymore. There's so much of it.
Yeah.
There's a stat I read somewhere was that someone now takes in as much information in 7 years as someone did in an entire lifetime in 1900.
Yeah.
And that's increasing. So there's a limitation to the brain as to how much. So we're scanning things quickly. We're not really reading them. They're becoming more, the content itself is becoming more polarized to grab our attention. So it's becoming more marketing oriented. And what I'm developing towards here is that we have a lot of information, but very little knowledge. And people have very, very little knowledge. And even people who want to extract knowledge from this information are struggling. Like if you're a financer and you want to understand what is the impact of some bad press around the WeWork CEO, like how do you quantify that? How do you take out all of the emotional vectors that people may or may not be reading and all of the different angles that everyone's taking around the world and make a decision quickly?
Oh, yeah.
It's
it's that pyramid. And Mihai Alizi, who was on the show before, he talked about this a couple of times. It's like you got that pyramid. The bottom of the pyramid is data. And then you move up a level, you get to information. You move up a level, you get to knowledge. And the very top of the pyramid is wisdom.
Exactly.
Right. Yeah. And it all builds up from that. But the bulk of what we're consuming is information and data.
Yeah, I think majority of it is data, and on the data level, which is we're just getting hit with stuff which in the background is actually being experimented on us to generate ad revenue or whatever. So in many ways, we are data points ourselves. And then what's actually happening is people are reacting to this information emotionally, because that's what it's done. It's designed to do that in order to grab your attention, and then it's having interesting effects on other aspects of society.
It also seems like you're getting sent in particular directions, and obviously what you are targeted certain information based on the information you've looked at before.
Absolutely.
So you unconsciously make a decision to read something, and then you get targeted with more information on that, and that then becomes your thinking, which is not necessarily what you set out in the first instance to do.
And this is the mathematical world would describe this as mutual exclusivity. So if two things are mutually exclusive, they're not related. And we kind of assume that a piece of information we see has just landed there, and that there was no relation beside it. But there's a massive relation behind it. And unfortunately, because our brain hasn't realized that, then we think that other people are seeing the same information and that they should hold the worldview that we have.
Yeah, exactly. I just had this experience. Last week we had Lizzie Hayashida on, and I was talking about her going into her funding round, and that she previously was with a business called Affirm. And I learned that when I was prepping for the episode, right? And I looked at Affirm, and I'm like, yep, I know who these guys are. They're, consumer lending credit out in the US. And I looked at Affirm and went right to Crunchbase to see where they were from a funding perspective, and saw that they were on their Series F, and saw the pedigree and profile of some of their investors. And I'm thinking, okay, there's probably some similarity between their pedigree and the pedigree of investors that Lizzie is going after. And I'm like, she probably knows this already, doesn't she? But I did that in a matter of 2 minutes, right? And went from a data point on one website to building some assumptions to building some knowledge, right? I wouldn't call it wisdom yet, right? But it can move that quickly.
Yeah.
And when we talked to Lizzie about it, she kind of, she's nodding her head and saying, but probably didn't want to give away too much on air. That, of course, you start thinking about those things, but I made the assumption that she's having the exact same conclusion that I am, because the data is available. But there's so much information out there,
even about yourself.
Exactly.
Even open information. People, it only happened to me yesterday.
What do you know about me?
It only happened to me yesterday. Someone tapped me up on LinkedIn, and someone had forwarded them my email, and they said, "Oh, we have a website now, Premind.ai. I didn't even realize that." He goes, "Oh, I checked your website out. It was really cool." I was like, "Oh, Jesus, you found out something I didn't know."
Yeah, there it is. Boom.
But I mean, so when we look at it like this, and you see that any one person is going to struggle, and you put in the huge emotional vector. So it's if you're a professional investor, seasoned or unseasoned, you're going to have a degree of education and then experiences on how the market has gone. And so you've been reading information, you're constantly making judgment calls, and it's impossible to even know your biases or the biases in the information that you were working with.
Totally.
Because you made a good point, and we talked about it on the way in. Like, we're sitting in a WeWork. They obviously have an IPO. I went looking because I was trying to find information that was the opposing case to it being a good investment. Because you look at the press and everything is negative on it.
They just want to beat the hell out of them, don't they?
So the assumption is that it's not going to do well. But there's obviously a case, but it was actually really hard to find the opposing case, because there was a few articles out there, but not many people were making that case, because obviously the first bit of bad press leads to, oh, okay, geez, I didn't realize that's bad.
Why is there no opposing case? Because they don't want there to be that content, because it doesn't have the emotional reaction, right? They want the CEO to be the bad guy, right? They want this guy to be overvalued, pumping the market, right? They want it to be, right, you guys have QE'd us to here.
It fits the narrative of the Ubers and all of the other negative stories before that.
Evil technology. And you know what? It's and you can get frustrated with the media, but it's all of us. We jump to conclusions and simplicities. The fact of the matter is, there's no such thing as evil technology, or there's no such thing as evil markets or evil financial systems or whatever. They are simply power. what happens is that something becomes very used because it's powerful, and when something is powerful, it has the ability to be evil or good. It's whether or not we regulate it and how we go about actually managing these systems.
Yeah, like the technology itself is not evil, and actually, you talk about evil tech, and I'm sure this Cambridge Analytica would be a kind of a name out there there'd be a view on that. But again, the tech, it wasn't the tech, it was the use of it and what they went.
The usage. Yeah. And I mean, I think they jumped through a number of hoops in order to, and there was fraud. Ultimately, at the end of the day, as far as I can tell, people said it was something that it wasn't. So that is not right. But the area of politics is so hyperly competitive that they've always pushed the lines, and
just looking for an edge.
Yeah, and the loser is always, particularly in a very, very competitive game, and this was the way when it was the other way around. The losers always feel they were hard done by because the winners did something out of line, But Obama had started with the whole micro payments and micro pieces on social, and if you watch the Cambridge Analytica piece on Netflix, it was the girl Brittany, whatever her name was, who was in the campaign. So she took that whole tricks and that's. So there's another one as well on Roger Stone. Get me Roger Stone, which is great. And love him or hate him, I don't know what your opinion is. It doesn't matter really. But at the end of the day, the guy said, look, if there isn't rules and we're the best, then we kind of end up creating the line, don't we? And there's a huge amount of truth with that. And if you don't go and to say that this is in or outside the rules, if it remains ambiguous and we're in a highly competitive area and we don't get slapped.
Push the boundaries on it.
Morality be damned.
Well, I don't know. It's just like, it's like in any competitive, like let's say competitive sports, we've agreed that there's a whole bunch of substances that are banned, and these are clearly outside the rules, but every other technique is allowed and encouraged. So until you actually put something into that list, whatever it is, mindfulness, hypnotism, believing in devils, whatever you want, it doesn't matter. If you lift the trophy, you win. That's that.
No, I get that.
So why don't you tell us, or if you can, a bit more about Premind?
So much like journalists, we see that professional investors are struggling with these information streams in the time period where the impact can be leveraged in the news cycle impact. We're calling that in the medium frequency trading zone, which is about 5 minutes to 1 month. And this is a bit of a dead zone at the moment. You have HFT, which is high frequency trading, which is like sub-millisecond. You have this, which isn't even coined yet, so I might coin it.
Trademark it.
Yeah, exactly. Then you've got long-only macro, which is where a lot of these guys play, and private equity, which is also a very interesting component in what's going on. And I think if you look at WeWork, there's a lot of private equity kind of pumping and then dumping onto the public markets. But anyway, so most of the guys are in this long-only gig, and it's simply because they really struggle. It's a bit of a joke in the industry around people who try to trade fluctuations in the daytime, because it's just a very difficult thing to do and a very difficult thing to do consistently, which is really what you need. So I think it's a hugely opportunistic application of our technology, where we look at mass signals of sentiment and news and understand how they impact the market in that range. And there's a very, very strong correlation, and it can be done, at instantaneous scale. So you can create predictive engines that will calculate this stuff on the fly much faster than a human being would be able to or could ever, and then make trades that will statistically make money over time.
Yeah. And how does this make the lives easier of, I forget his second name, but his name was Mark. He was the hedge fund manager of Pequot Navigator way back in the day, probably about 15 years ago. He was one of my clients when I was in Bermuda. And this guy had a portfolio of at least 1,000 stocks, all small cap stocks. And he looked frantic. You know, he was a very intense guy, but he liked to break for an hour at lunchtime to go play ultimate frisbee, or ultimate, as our friend Simon Cocking encouraged us we should call it. But he left someone on the controls during that time to be watching things every couple minutes, right, and looking for these trading signals. This was back in 2001 when we didn't have any of this type of stuff, right? So it was a lot easier back then. Fast forward 18 years and put Mark back into the driver's seat, right, where he's trading a portfolio of 1,000 stocks, but probably looking at 10,000. You know, or actually, 5,000 in the Russell Small Cap, right? How is this going to make his life easier?
So, I mean, I like to just to pull it way back and simplify it, because sometimes, and this is a great thing about the market, sometimes people can look at how can I make a hedge fund manager's job easier? Maybe I can automate some of the compliance or something like that. But how about this? How about we just make you more money, right? Isn't that the goal of the whole exercise? Yeah. You know, you know, and so the idea here is that we can use technology to make decisions better than human beings. What is a hedge fund? A hedge fund is a group of people who are organized to make decisions, checks and balances, and it has traditionally been mainly human organization. And we're seeing the rise of technology with the likes of HFT and some of the liquidity players as well. And there's some interesting technology. I wouldn't say there's much exciting stuff yet, but the fact of the matter is, tech. This is the real question I've been pondering a lot, because there's an ethical component to our businesses. Well, what's going to happen afterwards? Because these technical improvements are good in that I'm very confident I can create an algorithm that will trade much better than a human being in this frequency range. Just like someone who can say, I can create a control system that's much safer to fly a plane than to let the plane go mechanical on it. And once those systems are in place, you can't put the human back, because you're going to start losing a load of money, or you're going to start crashing planes. And so it's inevitable that where technology can be applied and can massively outperform human beings and do it at a fraction, like a millionth of the cost, that it's going to happen. There's no doubt that it will. And the question is, and this is a blog post I've been kind of mulling over when I have some time, is, well, what's everyone going to do afterwards? And we shouldn't see these efficiencies as bad, because at the moment in our market systems, our economics and our societies, they're seen as bad because we're getting rid of jobs, or we're automating the human being out of everything. But I think what we need is a huge cultural shift. I mean, if we look at, I'm looking at two areas of AI. Just two that I know reasonably well. One is self-driving cars. Self-driving cars will likely wipe out about 15 to 20% of jobs if that technology comes to fruition, which it very likely will. When you think of the fact that cars will become more efficient, there'll be no ownership, there'll be no parking, there'll be very few damages, insurance will drop. There'll be no taxis, there'll be no drivers.
Yeah.
I mean, all right, that's one thing, right? And then we look at where I'm at, where I think, I'd say, to be honest with you, we'll get to the point in the markets where everything under probably 3 months is going to be done by a computer better. Most already we're at a point where it's 90%, 95% of trades are done by computers anyway.
Yeah.
So you probably get that up to 99. You know, we get all that's left is this macro analysis viewpoint where people are watching unpredictable, other unpredictable people. So the game is understanding humans, not machines.
Yeah.
And how many jobs will rule out? So, you know, what's everyone going to do?
Play more frisbee.
Yeah, well, that's a good angle. You know, we're going to have to figure out how to keep ourselves busy, because we have the liberty to do so now. But I think we have a problem with our education systems, which is you go to school to become economically productive. And now you've got an economy that doesn't need you to be productive because the machines can do it.
Yeah.
So now what do we do?
Because I was at it was Futurescope, I think, and one of the panels, I was moderating a panel, and the panel before me, that was about IoT, and someone asked a question about self-driving cars, and the funny response was that, well, we're fine here in Ireland because we can't even get people to drive automatics. It was it was a joke response, but the idea being, well, actually, there is that cultural shift, but it's probably happening culturally we'll move a lot slower than the technology,
which is already happening, and there's a huge gap. And what you've seen there is something I actually look out for now. I call it cognitive dissonance. I've seen it in two industries. The first one was in news, where you go in and you speak to somebody and their business model is just being destroyed as they know it. They get hit by the first wave, which is digitization, then they get hit by the next wave, which is social, and they lose their printing of the newspaper, they lose the property section, they lose the job section, they lose the romantic section, they lose every part of their business. And you're kind of meeting them as they're going through this transition. And I've seen people in this industry, it's what happens when they're in a scenario like this. They just flicker from terror to excitement over and back, and they kind of crack jokes, and they make things about like the robots will shoot us all, and then no, it'll be grand. You'll figure it out. And unfortunately, when you get into a cognitive dissonance scenario, you're just accepting what's going to happen rather than trying to construct the new future. And it's the same in the finance game as well. Finance people, hedge funds, the first measure for me and validation is whether someone will meet you, someone important will meet you, like a hedge fund manager. I met 5 of them, right? I just had a 1-page document off my email, my personal email, and 5 hedge fund managers came out to meet me in a bar in London. And one of them turns around to me and says, I'm learning Python. Do you think that's a good idea? I was like, I'm really not sure. But it's not any one individual at the end of the day. We have to review this systematically, as this is going to happen.
Yeah, and you're mentioning the early adopters here, and I'm working with someone who is dependent on a number of early adopters coming to the fold in order to make his business successful. And he's in the right place for this particular product that he's building, because there's a lot of people in that market that are of that mindset, that they already see the future of what it's going to look like. It's a no-brainer that these things are happening and these things are coming. And he's having some great success in getting this business going quickly. He goes over to another country where those mindsets just aren't, and he gets totally discouraged, right? And it's just there's some cultural, social norms here that will impact how these new ideas actually, like you're saying, timing, right? And whether they scale or whether they...
Yeah. Well, I'd like to take a quote from my dad. He says, you're either an agent of change or the recipient of it.
Yeah.
And the thing about it is, this is what happened in the journalism industry, and they went from 450,000 journalists in the US to 250,000, and that drop happened in the space of, I think it was 3 to 5 years, right? So you can be dissident and you can turn around and you can say, we're going to keep printing papers, and our readers are different. They'll keep buying it. That's not until someone just wipes you off the face of the earth, and that's what happens. Then the change just starts happening extremely quickly, and new organizations pop up and competition happens. So like, I think there has to be an appreciation for the reality rather than just completely
head in the sand. Yeah. I'm seeing a bit of that.
So you've been through the highs, obviously, and the lows. Being involved in companies and setting up companies. What is it, do you think, from a personality point of view, or has helped you kind of navigate through that? And you talked about having the itch in terms of getting out and everything. And I suppose I'd be interested to know, because even if Paul hadn't come to you about NewsWhip, would you have then gone back into like a corporate world, or from a personality point of view, did something just keep driving you to, would you have got involved with something else because you felt you needed to? Or
loads of good questions there. I mean, would I've gone back? I didn't want to, for sure. And the one thing I had a huge amount of was persistence, and I do think that is the number one thing. I don't know why. Once I made the decision, I just decided I was not going to look back. Now you obviously have to be realistic as well. If you get to a point where it just doesn't make any sense, you know what? I flipped everything I did, and I think this is what the sign of experience is, that you will flip your mind frame, And I try to get this across to founders when I'm talking to them now. So they pitch me an idea. I know the idea is dog shit, so I say. And I'm pretty good at taking terrible ideas because I've had terrible ideas and I've tried to implement them, and I know the cost and the amount of time and expense and wasted energy that it has. So I just tell them my story and tell them, do you want to be like me or no? But I ask them a question. I say, hey, look, do you want your idea to be successful? Do you want you to be successful? Those are two different things. And the first idea you had, if you kind of think of it rigidly and you don't move, you're really going to be stuck, and you got to evolve. You got to constantly evolve. So from my own perspective, I think in the beginning I thought quite rigidly about things, and you know what? Over time, I've actually found that you become more who you are. In that, like I had a hugely international youth, and that created I love different cultures and experiences of different societies or different places, and you know, if you have a rigid mind frame, you're kind of getting away from that. And I'd say I just flipped around from thinking I had the answers, which was a bit of an engineering and a bit of an eccentric professional kind of mindset, to going, actually, you know what? I love not having the answers. I'm just gonna constantly, I'm not even gonna try answer. I'm just gonna keep on asking more questions. I'm just gonna keep on loading up the questions, and I'm just gonna like play around. I've actually found that because now as I go at it again in what are we at, lap 3, doing it through that process, firstly just takes away all the stress. You're just not concerned at all. You're just in your own zone. It's kind of like going for a run, taking your own pace. And then but secondly, having that open-mindedness allows for shortcuts, because I think when you have this rigidity, you think, right, this is the way I'm going to climb the hill, but once you get 20% up the hill, you go, wait, there's stairs right there that somebody built. Why don't I just walk up that? Oh, wait, there's stairs go up and there's an elevator there. Right? Imagine you went the whole way around the back and you find that was the route up at the end.
But is it the journey or the destination?
It's absolutely the journey. Yeah. And that's why I like that idea of, this is how we're thinking. This is the plot at the moment, but this is always going to move and evolve. And so, the journey, if you don't love the journey as an entrepreneur, you'll never ever make it. You'll never make it, because usually by the time you get to the goal, you're so busy. I mean, I remember I could not have, when I did my first one, if you turn around to me and say that at one point I would win the Entrepreneur of the Year award, I would just say you're mad. You know, I just thought it was insane. And then by the time I got to the point where I won it, amazing, obviously great evening, enjoyed it so much, but at the end of the day, I had to get up the next day and blast out a serious day of work. I was so focused on our next milestones in the business, and things were back at that point. You're running a 70-person organization, and you're kind of going, yeah, that's a great award, but I got to take care of these people. Right? And so often by the time you get to the milestone, you're so focused down the line, and that's ultimately what entrepreneurs are supposed to do. You're looking way down the line. That, thanks guys, but we're looking 3 steps ahead of that now. That was exciting for me when I was in Easy Deals.
No, I get that. No, this interesting thing, and I think I've said this to you before, Andrew, I was in the room that night.
Oh yeah, of course.
Now it's a big room out there in City West where they have the EY Entrepreneur of the Year Awards. My buddy Fergus McNally invited me for that one. It was pretty cool. And when you reached out to me in December, I kind of saw your face, your picture on your profile on LinkedIn, and it's you that night wearing your tux. I'm like, I know that guy.
Yeah, that's my great cropping. I love the Irish Times photographers. They always get the best picture of me.
You're like, really? Yeah, awesome. A hard decision that night to, like you said, staying out late or not staying out late. Obviously, you figured that out pretty well. But
I was just exhausted, actually, to be honest with you. Just emotional roller coaster, and everyone's shaking your hand, and you kind of got into a zone of just blur. A really pleasurable blur. Yeah, exactly.
Any other hard decisions along the way that really stand out as kind of took a toll on you to make that decision?
I think decisions. Well, the first thing I noticed when I left corporate and started setting up was how many decisions you make. Yeah. You've no idea when you're in another organizations how protected you are from all the decisions you have to make. And I think it's a terrible thing, because people don't get used to, oh, wait a minute, I'm just going to make 8 decisions today and all of them are massively consequential. That's your first day as a startup, right? Yeah. And then tomorrow it's going to be 28, and then the next day it's going to be 38. And you got to start watching, how you're making these things. For me, I got used to that reasonably quickly. You know, just kind of like, okay, well, this is the new paradigm. But the other things that you've got to, I think the most difficult things I've found with this more internally figuring out what's right for yourself. Yeah. There is a huge kind of feeling that you must take responsibility for everything, particularly in a startup when you get going. And actually, now that I go, you know, you thought I was CEO, but there's no way I would be CEO, you know, and if anything, I want to be more CTO than I was even the last time, because the last time I got pulled into other things like management and leadership and stuff, and I like them and I enjoyed them, but actually, where are you best and where are you happiest?
Exactly.
And when you kind of end up getting pulled a little way off course, and that can be yourself personally or can be yourself as a business, it's a death by 1,000 cuts. You don't notice it. It's not like a decision. Decisions you can labor over, you can sleep, and then you can be done with them. But this is kind of like, you don't realize, but you're actually really tiring yourself out. And what I see, I've mentioned it before, but what I see extensively in the entrepreneurship game is burnout. Yeah. There's a huge burnout, and it's some people overwork, but what I really see over and over again is psychological burnout. People are just exhausted. They're exhausted from the difficulty of dealing with the multiple stresses, or being responsible for so much stuff that they just can't actually can't comprehend, and they can never really get on top of it.
Because you have to wear all those hats. And actually, when we talked to Klaus Christensen from Know Your Customer, he talked about it, and Lizzie from Change Donations mentioned it as well. It's the, you know, it's a complete, what you set out to do and what you started doing, you were playing to your skills and you've built something, but you end up like moving almost so far away from that bit by the time you're like taking on as a senior person, you're building a staff and scaling internationally. The stuff you set out that you enjoyed and it was the reason you started is like 10% of your job then.
You end up a million miles away. Like, as I said, do you want to be successful? Do you want your idea to be successful? My first idea was to digitize Irish businesses. And here I am making predictions from news and stock markets. From news and information on the stock market, right? And through that, I've gone through, I don't know how many iterations. I could never have in a million years told you that I'd even go into the news industry, and not only to then understand what I understand of it. And so that's the first thing I think, and it can take a while, is to get rid of that rigidity, which is that, firstly, there's a small minority of things that are under your control, so just relax. Right? There's only so much. Stick to what you're good at and find other people who are good as well at other things. And when you make a good synergy, don't try and shovel when you're not good at shoveling, right? Yep. You know, don't try and keep on and getting away, and be okay with the fact that you are going to take a journey, and every time you take 5 steps, you will not know what the next 5 steps are. Yeah. If you can't handle that, it's just not the place for you. It's just going to psychologically destroy you. It's going to tire you out so much, because people will be up all night stressing. I get the best night's sleep ever, you know, even when you can be running a company that could necessarily be in distress. But once you kind of come with your way of dealing with it, then you're much, much better actually equipped going through it.
I really like that.
Well, I mean, we could obviously talk, and we will probably separately talk for hours on lots of interesting topics. But I'm conscious that we have to wrap up at a certain point. Firstly, I wanted to know, I suppose, what does the next 6 to 12 months look like?
The next 6 to 12 months, I mean, I'm just loving where I'm at now. It's great. So I've been back deep into the tech, developing. So continuing to, we've just got our first set of what we call proof of concept results out. That's to go out and start talking to partners. Those results are phenomenal. I'm touch wood, I'm very pleasantly surprised myself. I'm kind of like, whoa, we got some. Then the next stage is to go to what we call proof of value. So that's to get that predictive capability and to exercise it into the market, but not actually exercise it in the market, but to be able to present a strategy to a partner as to how they would do it, and for them to be able to figure out how much money they could make off it. So really that is the main focus now, is to get the tech and the business to a point where we can have a conversation with someone with a huge amount of assets under value who turns around and go, wow, that's a very impressive report. We need to start working with you guys. Yeah. And once we get to that point, we want to conjoin ourselves tightly, tight coupling of development. This is a strategic play where we strategically align ourselves with particular entities, because the market is such that you don't want to give your edge to everybody. And so the main goal for us in the MVP is to get to that one strategic partner. And the current goal at the moment is to work back from $1 billion under asset under management, and so to get there as soon as possible. Yeah. Awesome.
Great. It's going to be a busy next 6 to 12 months then.
I don't think we'll get to there. No, we don't even have a plan to get there in 6 to 12 months. The next 6 months is to put the wheels on the business and get to proof of value delivery, open some serious conversations, and get enough money on board to get us to the $1 billion.
Yeah, very good.
Finally, I always like to ask, what would people not expect to know about you?
What would people not expect to know? One thing I like doing, and it's something I actually kind of take a little bit of pride in, is the ability to be, innocuous? Is that the right word? Where people don't expect much from you. So like I try to do it a lot, particularly when I'm traveling, because I find you get information a lot easier, or you're meeting potential customers, is to hold back a lot about any of your successes, so I think a lot of people are quite surprised to hear what I've done. It's usually how I approach people. I'm probably wearing a t-shirt and a hoodie and a pair of jeans. Kind of dressed up today. I don't know why I felt like it.
No, I get what you're talking about. Because what's that phrase? It's relatively innocuous, right?
Yeah.
Are you relatively innocuous?
I love it. Yeah. I absolutely love that. I really... even when I was in China, because it's pretty hard to like not stand out when you're in Shanghai and you're like the only white person in a square mile. Yeah. But like you still can. It's more about, to be honest with you, in my experience, what I found is a bit like what you guys are doing here is people are very open and will share a lot of information, particularly if you don't come across threatening and you ask good questions and you engage well. And so when you do that, I just find you just get this ream of information from loads of different sources, and you try and that for an entrepreneur is incredibly important, because you kind of read macro data and then you want to
build that into your product.
You want to understand, exactly.
But I think even to that, it's just when you meet someone who's actually genuinely interested, like they've no agenda, or if you haven't presented yourself in a particular way, they've no preconception, so they'll just be more open. And they see, he's asking interesting questions, they want to know more. It's
exactly
tell us more, sort of thing.
So I kind of learned that from my journalist customers. So what do people not expect from me? I always try to come across in that way, and then if they do find, I actually don't really like the question, what do you do, or anything like that. I often will lie.
Ooh, yeah. 19 years now away from the US, that question has kind of gone out of my vocabulary. Yeah.
Sometimes I just say I work in technology, or I just say I work in tech. And that's usually boring enough to
I started saying that too. Yeah.
But eventually what happens is, obviously, as a conversation continues, someone will find out that, you might have had some success before, and then their head is kind of blown, but then your cover is blown.
I often actually, and my wife gives out to me about it, but usually when I'm out, even at like weddings or whatever, I'll just make up something completely different. And
I'm an accountant. Yeah. I'm a tax auditor.
No, I'll pick something like there's a movie we watch, and the guy in the movie, he's pretending to be a German, and he tells this person that he sells sheep online, but like people to use the sheep like as their watchdog at home, or like it's an individual sheep. This guy ships them around the world, and so I sometimes I just take the piss and I'd be like, oh, that's what I do. I buy and export sheep, but like for personal use. Just because you never know what conversation
you might end up in the media with that comment.
Cheap or high-end baby furniture, one or the other. They both work, right?
Just to be more interesting.
I think that's what they say. What we watch movies and James Bond and the spies, and they're always like magic, and they fly around in rockets and stuff like that. But actually, spies are completely the opposite. They're much more like what we're describing. Like, what's your job? Oh, I'm a primary school assistant teacher. I love kids.
Yeah, awesome. For you.
So, where do you work? I work in the bank. Oh, tell me about the bank.
No, I don't want to.
Well, listen, thank you very much for being on the show.
Thanks, Andrew. It's great to have you here.
Okay.
Money never sleeps, pal.
That wraps it up, folks. Thanks to Andrew for opening up his mind to help us figure out why he does what he does. Remember, if you or a colleague need help attracting and retaining great talent for your fintech or financial services company, get in touch with the team at Top Tier Recruitment as they really know their stuff. You can find them at toptierrecruitment.com. Contacts for Andrew are in the show notes for this episode on moneyneversleeps.ie, so check us out online. If you want to get involved with the show, drop us a line on info@moneyneversleeps.ie or DM us on Twitter at MNSShow. We're on all the major podcast platforms and YouTube. And remember, Money Never Sleeps is spelled as all one word. As for me, I increase the odds of startup success. DM me on Twitter at PTownsendNV if you want to know more. And you can follow Owen on Twitter at OwenFitzgerald9. Finally, thanks to Conan Brophy from Create Sound for recording and editing this podcast. Till next time, thanks for listening. See ya!